Hello, my friends, and welcome to today's episode of Stand Up, where I've got our good friend Eric Segall joining me to talk about the latest in the Trump trial, but not most importantly, unlike most of the media, which is dedicating, I would argue, far too much time to it. And I'll play a clip from Jon Stewart criticizing it hilariously on The Daily Show last night. But there are more important issues to talk about with Professor Segall that are before the Supreme Court, including the disgraced former president's possible immunity case, which is going to be argued this Thursday. So we get into that, new abortion case, and so much more in my conversation with Eric today, also talking about these issues on campus regarding free speech and the protests and so on. I still am not very read into that, but I really do plan to dig into that. They continued today. I don't have a news segment like I normally do because I told you I am on a special mission this week and not predictable what I'm going to be able to get into, but I do have this great conversation with Segall. And before that, here is a clip from Jon Stewart criticizing the media's obsession with Trump's case. And specifically, I would argue, yes, you talk about it, you discuss it, as I do with Eric today, but you don't dedicate your entire hour over it, and you don't act like every single weird moment in the trial, his facial expressions, the drawings, and everything else matter more than other things. So here's Jon Stewart. It's a much larger piece. He goes on this, the entire opening of the show, I think about 10 minutes, and I absolutely loved it. So here's that.
At this point, you're probably saying to yourself, how many television hours have they devoted to what Donald Trump, a man who has not been off any of our screens for more than 30 seconds in the last 8 years, looks like? The answer is not nearly as many hours as describing his every movement.
Trump craned his neck to eye prospective jurors and flashed a tight-lipped smile.
Leaning to the left a little bit, quiet, his arms crossed as well.
Hunched over with his elbows on the desk. Looked through papers and periodically whispered to his attorneys.
Fidgeted and leaned back, the scowl fixed to his face while he sat squinting.
He was actually biting his lip during today's proceedings.
His lips pursed in that characteristic Trump way.
His eyeballs gone. The hulking former president stood up slowly. He walked towards me with a mixture of desire, scorn, and let's call it age-related confusion. It was then that I realized that this former president of the United States has a front butt. Look, at some point in this trial, something important and revelatory is going to happen. But none of us are going to notice because the hours spent on his speculative facial tics, if the media tries to make us feel like the most mundane bullshit is earth-shattering, we won't believe you when it's really interesting. It's your classic boy who cried wolf blitzer. Look, it's a trial. It's boring, mostly. I've been on jury duty, and I can... That's not me! That's a different guy!
It's a picture of a different guy. It's pretty funny, but I had to cut it and say that.
It may be me. Look, trials are a lot of procedural shit, and side conferences, and sidebars, and what's Exhibit 37-2A, and you're not out of order, this whole court is out of order. Look. The one person who's had the most normal reaction to the trial so far is Donald Trump.
Donald Trump fell asleep on multiple days during his criminal trial.
As he should. I mean, he's been up since 2 a.m. rage tweeting. He needs his anger sleep. Look, we got a long ways to go here. It's the first day of the first of his 438 trials to come. Pace yourselves. And if you're bored, you can always start planning how you're going to up covering his next trial and the sober mea culpa you'll deliver during his next term as president.
Yes. Well, that is all I've got for you at the opening of the show today. Like I said, did not get to spend as much time on it as I wanted to. Of course, I am looking forward to be back with the regular format tomorrow, where it looks like I'll finally have Stephanie Kelton on the show to talk about modern monetary theory. Shout out to the Sandman. He finally made it happen. Sanford Friedman, who many of you know from our Hangouts and Pod Jam, he got that baby done for me. He really desperately wants us to talk about that, and I want to talk about that. And there's a new documentary dedicated to it, so we should have Stephanie Kelton on tomorrow's show. There won't be a Hangout Thursday night because of my special mission, but, of course, I'll be back with that next week, too. You can always hang out with us in the Discord platform where you're never alone if you're a stand-up community and member and subscriber. All right. Well, now it's time to get to my conversation with Eric Segall. We cover a lot of the news, so I feel a little less guilty in not putting that news segment out there that happened today and this week and what's about to happen. And as always, Segall explains it for us so the layman can understand, not just the law students in his classroom at Georgia State University, where he is a constitutional law scholar, a highly respected one who has only gained more credibility during the time that we've gotten to know Eric. He, of course, is a very close personal friend of mine. I love him to death. You can hear him hosting his own podcast, Supreme Myths. Get his book, Supreme Myths, and his other book, Originalism as Faith, and hopefully his future books. Eric Segall, one of the greatest, joins me right now. It's time for the Legal Eagle. There he is, Eric Segall, the guy I wanted to talk to right now, not only because I wanted to get your reaction to Trump on trial, but to obviously what's happening at the Supreme Court or what's about to happen. Big cases coming up that we had to talk about in preview. But I will let you start with your standard disclaimer of you're not a criminal justice expert, you're a constitutional law scholar, before we go into what is happening this week with Trump's first criminal trial. Hello and welcome back.
Well, thank you for having me. I am not a criminal law professor, although I will say with the Trump case in Georgia, I learned more about RICO than I thought I would ever have to know to teach constitutional law. And the New York stuff is fascinating, Pete. We are taping this on Tuesday at 12:20 Eastern. And as we sit here, this morning there was a contempt hearing about Donald Trump violating the gag order in the New York.
Just to be clear, a hearing within the hearing.
Yes. And the lawyer was awful. Oh, my God. I would recommend to all law students, a number of people live tweeted this. You can't see it because it's not on TV. But Anna Bowers of MSNBC, I think she is, and Katie Fang and others. Go and look at it, and it'll teach you how not to be a lawyer.
What did he do?
The judge at one point said to the lawyer, I need some case law. Give me some case law. And the lawyer said, I don't have any case law. It's just common sense. That's an answer you never give.
He said, the judge said to Trump's lawyer, Todd Blanche, you're losing all credibility with the court.
That's a bad thing to hear, Pete. You never want to hear that.
What does that even mean? How can a judge say that to a lawyer? I mean, they can say anything they want, right, in their courtroom. But
judges say much meaner things
than
that. From what I can tell, and again, I'm relying on the reporting of others, which is not something I normally try to do. But from what I can tell, the lawyer is doing everything he can do but answer the judge's questions with any kind of responsible responses. And just don't do that. If you're a young lawyer and you're stuck and you have nothing, then you figure out a way to convey to the judge, Your Honor, the law here is unclear. I'm making the best arguments I can, but I admit my opponent has some good arguments, and this is a tough case. I think it's true for my client, and here's why. But what you don't do is, bravado is the worst thing. Judges don't want to see bravado. And this, from what I can tell, this lawyer was just avoiding and evading and not being very humble.
I feel like what we're seeing happen, and you can certainly speak to this, is what everybody predicted would happen if Trump were on trial, which would be he would be in a place he's certainly been in many times, but not since before he was president. He sat in a lot of courtrooms and for a lot of depositions where he had to be honest and play by the rules, but we haven't seen that guy. And what we still see is him coming out of the court and rewriting and creating a different narrative for his followers and fans. But what I'm trying to tell you is watching him have to play by the rules and be under the control of somebody else is a whole different guy to us.
Well, narcissists can't do that. Like he doesn't have the physical capability of really listening to what other people say. Pete, do you think he wants to go to jail for like a night? I think he wants to go to jail for like one night.
That's a great question because, of course, you say no, he doesn't want to go to a 3-star hotel for a night. But,
right.
He's been catered to his entire life. He's never even worked a day of like physical labor, it doesn't seem. Right. And to sleep in a bed that isn't made of gold with his name on it and to maybe feel in danger and out of control, I can't see him ever doing anything, even something like that, for the PR value.
That's probably right. But maybe he thinks this would be such a cataclysmic visual that it would help him a lot with the election. And if he thinks that, he might not be wrong. I'm not saying he's right, but he might not be wrong.
You called him a narcissist, and we're in the arena of psychology, and we'll leave in just a moment. But the idea of him being in a prison suit of any sort and having a photograph out there, I believe that's too much for his ego to ever allow him to be seen that way. He won't allow his hair to be seen wet.
I guess that's right. So now I need an explanation, though. I think you're probably right. But the one thing I'm hanging back on is, then what's the explanation for his doing everything he can to be right up to the line of the judge's gag order, if not over the line? We may find out later. My prediction is the judge is going to fine him. Some amount doesn't matter. But the judge today or tomorrow or Monday is going to warn him any more violations and you will go to jail. That's what I think is going to happen. And then we'll see what Trump does after that.
Anything else you want to say about this judge or the trial before we move on?
What is one of the most important cases in American history, which is this Thursday's argument in Trump versus United States. That's the biggest news of this week, and it's huge. And there
have been other arguments at the Supreme Court this week, but we're actually going to talk only about the homelessness one, because we're going to talk about two upcoming cases that are about Trump's immunity, what you just mentioned, the Thursday case, presidential immunity, and an abortion case. Do I have it right as to? Yeah,
three cases. We have the homelessness case, the abortion case, the emergency room case, and the big immunity case on Thursday.
Okay, the abortion/emergency, that's the same case. Okay, so let's get to Trump v. U.S. This is presidential immunity.
So a lot of people are saying, and they're not totally wrong, but they're not totally right. Obviously, the Supreme Court is not going to hold and should not hold and will not hold that presidents never, ever, under any circumstances, can be indicted in a criminal case for things he did while in office. That's just not going to happen, and I think that's almost a unanimous view. So that's not going to happen. But, Pete, the way the media is portraying it, that's not really what's important about this case. What's important about this case is how the judges reject the absolute claim of immunity. And let me just give you two real quick examples. On the one hand, they could say, no American is above the law. If you commit a criminal act, you're liable for it. I don't care if you're president or dog catcher, and good luck to you. Right. And that would be great. I think that would be interesting. I'm not sure that's the right answer. I think the right answer is, when a president engages in an act authorized by law, what that means is a federal statute or the Constitution gives him the right to make a decision over whatever it is he's making a decision, then that's not a criminal offense by definition, because the law authorizes it. And here's a key point, Pete. States can't make presidential obligations under federal law illegal. So if he's acting in his official duties, yes, he has immunity, and he should have immunity. We can't live in a world where presidents make a decision to, make the student loan defaults go away or add to the EPA's ability to regulate carbon dioxide, whatever, and then say, that was criminal, so you go to jail. No, we can't live in that world, and we won't. But, so the big question is, what do we mean by official duties? And that's where I'm worried. Because to me, it is obvious that nothing Trump did surrounding January 6th had anything to do with his official duties, and therefore the court should say, what a jury has to find is that the president was not legally engaging in presidential duties when he did those things on January 6th. And if a jury finds that, then if he committed a criminal offense, he can be convicted. But they may not say that. They may say something to the effect of, well, we're not going to give him total immunity, but you're going to have to prove a degree of bad faith. That's hard to prove. You're going to have to prove a clear knowledge of the criminal law. And here's my biggest concern, Pete. A little bit in the weeds, I apologize, but this is what I think is going to happen. If a police officer, beats somebody up, or does something illegal on the job, we have this whole doctrine of qualified immunity the Supreme Court has made up. People like Clark Nelly, who've been on your show, who's a libertarian, so we don't like a lot of what he says about guns and other things, but he's great on criminal justice.
We've talked about the issue several times. There's a woman, I can't think of her name right now, wrote a great book this year about it. Go ahead.
So qualified qualified immunity basically says you have to know what you're doing is illegal before you can be liable. A lot of liberals hate that, and even some conservatives hate that. I don't think the rule is terrible. I think the way it's implemented is terrible. But the rule itself makes sense. Pete, I'm a state employee. If I grade a student's exam and the student thinks I did it arbitrarily and capriciously, I should have the defense of, no, I did it in good faith. I may have been wrong, but I did it in good faith, right? I'm a state employee. If I'm sued for that, I want that qualified immunity. Now, police officers who engage in egregious behavior should lose that immunity. In any event.
Well, qualified immunity, just to be clear, it's a type of legal immunity that protects a government official from lawsuits alleging that the official violated the plaintiff's rights. So it's employed by law enforcement officers.
But the test is crazy. The idea is correct. The test is crazy. And everybody agrees the test is crazy. Conservatives, liberals, and moderates. The test is, did you violate, you meaning the state officer or the federal officer, did you violate clearly existing law? Did you know with a great degree of certainty what you did was illegal? And that's so what lower court judges are doing is, unless this case is exactly like a previous case, qualified immunity already applies.
Again, this is the January 6th case, and this is the Supreme Court is looking at if the president of the United States, any president, can be prosecuted for anything before you allow the January 6th case to take place. This was the challenge that Trump's lawyers made. It has delayed the hearing that Judge Chutkan would be, we thought might be hearing now. And the Supreme Court is, they've kicked this way down the field, the very end of the term.
The last argument to be heard. And so you've been getting in the kind of weeds about what the law is, but really all people need to know is, I think, can the president do whatever he wants, including order Navy SEALs to assassinate his political opponent? Can he? Which is what one of the trial judges in the lower court asked, right? The answer to that's no. The court is going to say you can't commit cold-blooded murder for an illegitimate reason, and if you do, you'll be arrested. You'll be convicted after you leave office. That's not the issue. The issue is what state of – see, that's what I'm talking about, Pete. But I'm telling you, the real legal issue here is what state of mind does the president has to have in order to be eligible to be prosecuted in a criminal case for acts done while he was president. And that's not an easy question. Everybody thinks that's an easy question. It's not. It's a very hard question. Now I have to say, Pete, I wouldn't be me. Your audience would be disappointed in me if I didn't say the following. In a world where textualism and originalism were serious things, and in a world where the 5 justices who identify as originalists were not complete hypocrites, what they would say is there is nothing in the text of the Constitution that gives a president immunity. There is something in the text of the Constitution that gives Congress immunity. So they knew how, the founding fathers knew how to put immunity in the Constitution. They did it for the Congress. They didn't do it for the president. There's no historical basis, really, for finding presidential immunity from criminal conviction for acts taken outside of their official duties. So, this should be an easy case. And by the way, the D.C. Circuit, even the conservatives on the D.C. Circuit, found it an easy case. They resolved this very quickly.
Right, very important to note.
And the court should have denied cert. The court should have said, that's a great opinion. You're right. And then he goes to trial a month, and then the trial would already be going on, or at least would be, in the very planning stages. The court is slow playing this.
Give me your. You have a bit about the bad faith of the court. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying it's not a coincidence that the court fast-tracked the disqualification issue. They resolved that very quickly, which, by the way, I agree with. And you and I disagree on this, and that's okay. But I think they made the right decision, and they did it quickly.
On whether or not the 14th Amendment.
So they fast-tracked that. I mean, really fast. And then they totally slow-roll the immunity question for the purpose, I think, of delaying the January 6th trial. And that's not what, that's just evident. That's just exhibit number 196 as to why the court is not a court. The court's job is not to be worried about Trump's trial schedule. The court's job is to decide the immunity question. And given the D.C. Circuit's comprehensive and, by the way, applauded decision by virtually all sides of the political equation, there was no reason for the court to delay this for months, except they're acting in bad faith. That's the only reason. There's no other reason. Because we know what they're going to do, Pete. They are not going to say Trump is immune at all times, in all places, for everything he did. They're not going to say that. What they may do is make it very hard for him to be prosecuted. That's a different conversation. And that's kind of a weeds conversation. But you are right, 100% correct, that this is mostly about the timing, and people should be very upset at the Supreme Court. Even if you're pro-Trump, we all have an interest in getting this done, right? Like Rick Hasen said months ago, and Rick, of course, is a progressive. He's been on your show. He is the leading election law expert in the country. But Rick said, more important than getting it right is getting it done. And he's right about that. He really is. I mean,
no, I'm confused and concerned, and maybe I don't want to belabor more talk on this case, but when you said that the Supreme Court could decide something that would make it harder to prosecute him in this case or in any case, I guess, do you want to say more about?
Sure. It's going to take me. It's not a sound bite, but I'll be as fast as I
would
can.
like a sound bite. Can you make it a sound bite?
No, but I can make it a couple sentences.
Son of a bitch.
So when Trump gave his speech on January 6th, urging people to go fight and go to the Capitol and all that stuff, there are some issues. You know, was that free speech? Is that protected? We don't have to deal with any of that. The court could set up a system where only if Trump knew that what he was doing clearly violated the law, not violated the law, but clearly and unequivocally violated very clear pre-existing law, can he be prosecuted? Pete, that is the standard for police officers. If a police officer is alleged to do something illegal, the qualified immunity question is, did he know he was violating pre-existing law? If that's the standard they use for Trump and January 6th, Pete, there are hundreds of law professors, experts in free speech, who disagree over whether that January 6th speech is protected or not. Whether whoever's right doesn't matter. As long as there's uncertainty, then a certain level of proof would make it impossible to convict Trump for that speech and for the things around that speech. And that's real serious. So what I'm saying to you is this. The way the court writes the decision is going to be incredibly important to how Trump is treated in this case, but also how future presidents can be treated by the criminal law. And I have to admit, that's not an easy question, nor an easy opinion to write, which means it's even worse they waited this long for oral argument. Because they're not wrong that this is a hard issue. But they just shouldn't have delayed it, Pete. There's no reason on earth to delay this.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the next case that is on our list to discuss because it is on the court's agenda. Well, I should say it's already been argued. This was, 2 days ago. This is about homelessness and civil fines argued yesterday, I guess. And so this is from a city called Grants Pass in Oregon. And however, it is an issue around the country, homelessness, and around the world, obviously. And my understanding, which is very, very limited and brief, is simply that the liberals on the court argued you're criminalizing not having a house. You're making it a crime to be homeless. And the conservatives made arguments that were different than that, at least to say the opposite. But I mean, I was about to say they were more nuanced, but I'm sure they were all nuanced. I just heard a couple clips that I played on the show and read something about it. But how important is this issue that was argued, and how does it affect the homelessness issue or just municipalities around the country?
Well, I think the issue of unhoused people is one of our most important social, cultural, political, educational, financial issues in America today. You know, I think I think whatever side one is on, immigration is huge, obviously. Women's reproductive rights is unbelievably huge. And I think this issue of homelessness is unbelievably huge and complicated. It's not that it's illegal to be homeless. It's illegal to, I know this is going to sound insane, to kind of like use a blanket or a bed or a tent to sleep out in the homelessness that one finds oneself in or one is subjected to. There's a lot of underlying difficult legal distinctions here, like versus status versus, is being homeless a status or is being homeless a decision? Or a choice or an activity, because you can't make status illegal. It's not illegal to be a drug addict. It's not illegal to be an alcoholic. It is illegal to drive while drunk, and it is illegal to use heroin. So that status conduct distinction, a big part of the argument yesterday was, is homelessness status or is it something else? And status, it can't be punished. But Pete, here's what I want to say. The legal issues here in the Supreme Court are less important because this case is not going to, either direction is not going to make a big deal. We have to figure out as a country what we're going to do with this social problem. You know, we had this once before, Pete. In the 70s, New York and San Francisco and other cities, but mostly New York and San Francisco, had huge unhoused people's problems. And the solution back then, in no small part, I think, due to Giuliani, but also the powers that be in San Francisco, was to basically take them off the street and put them in insane asylums and put them in, commit them, involuntary commitment type situations. That made everything worse. That didn't help. That created more societal problems. So how we respond to this crisis is huge. Here's what I want to say, and it won't surprise you. I don't have the answers to the problem of unhoused people and what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do in urban areas that cause congestion and problems. I don't have the answers. It requires police and civic leaders and civil rights leaders and legislators to get together and try to solve this issue in a humane way that protects both the unhoused people and protects the communities at large. Here's what I know. I would never turn to either Justice Sotomayor or Justice Roberts to solve this problem. And we should not be looking to this Supreme Court to solve this problem. The only problem the Supreme Court can solve is, can you arrest somebody for sleeping on a sleeping bag in a public space? And that should, whatever the answer to that question is, it needs to be very narrow. And the court needs to say, but overall, what to do about this is way beyond our pay grades. And we need people to think about this deeply and seriously. And that's all I'm going to say about it, because I don't have the answer. I'm not an expert in urban issues and urban planning, but neither is Justice Roberts.
Right.
It should be done extremely narrowly, and hopefully the real decisions about what to do about this problem will be left to the local communities where Thomas Jefferson would have wanted this issue resolved.
I have offered a policy solution over and over. Nobody wants to hear it. People say it's an insensitive solution, but I think that every person who is unhoused should be given a van and a YouTube account, because there is money to be made in that van life YouTube channel. And you live in your car and you film it and you tell everybody how difficult things are, and then you get paid.
That idea is certainly 10 times better than our status quo. 10 times better. Anything, the status quo right now is terrible. In Atlanta, we have some of this. I know you have a lot of it in New York, but my understanding is in Portland, this is
people, the arguments that most animate people around homelessness, and we won't belabor it any more than this last point, are crime and just filth. They're taking shits and pissing and whatever they're doing, littering. It's ugly. It's terrible. Nobody wants to see it, but also crime, which I think is a far less likely, or, what you said is congestion and I think something else as to what the problem is. But I see it as being a problem for the people who are homeless, not for being a problem for the public at large who doesn't like to see it, or I just don't see it as a crime issue very much either. The crimes happen, crimes occur. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they don't, but
I'm just saying it's both. We need people to buy into a solution. That's what we need. Whatever the solution is. By the way, I like your solution.
Tiny houses. The solution is found in other communities and countries throughout the world, I would argue.
Should we get into the abortion case?
Let's do abortion and why this case is a really big deal. I know you've been wanting to talk about it. Of course, Eric is a real activist and has been involved in Planned Parenthood for years. I think that's how you and Lynn met, actually. And your mom was a big feminist. That's how you were raised. You care deeply about this issue, and you're pretty much one of the best legal minds to discuss this issue, even though you're a dude.
Thank you. I was ahead of the curve on getting rid of Roe and Casey will, in fact, help the Democratic Party Democrats no end. I was ahead of that curve. But anyway, Pete, this is a very interesting Supreme Court case in a way I have not read yet. I've read about it, but one thing people have to understand is this case literally involves life and death. Like, we joke about that sometimes, but this is not joking. Like, this is a life and death case. So the law in America is, if you are a hospital and you receive federal funds, and my understanding is that's most hospitals, I don't know that for a fact, but I'm pretty sure a huge percentage of American hospitals need federal money.
Well, if they take Medicare patients.
And that too, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, okay. So then you have to. So Medicare is a cooperative state-federal program where the feds give the states money, or hospitals money, but you have to abide by the feds' conditions, which is fair because it's the feds' money. If I give my teenagers money to go to dinner, I'm allowed to say, but you can't use it for alcohol. Whatever.
How does that go for you? I'll tell you how it goes for me.
I'll tell you in a couple of years. So this case is a rule that if you take Medicare patients or federal funds, you have to. In an emergency, you can't turn anybody away, and if it's life-threatening, you've got to save the person's life. Which, by the way, is how any civilized hospital should behave, with or without federal funding. Right?
Yeah,
you're dying. Oh, goodbye. Come on. What are we doing here? Anyway, so that's the rule. Idaho and a few other states, had these draconian abortion laws, and Idaho's law says that the only exception to abortion might be rape or incest, or the life of the woman, but it has to be like a death situation. So this state law is inconsistent, according to doctors, not according to Segall, because I don't have the medical knowledge for this. But according to doctors, this state law will get in the way. So a woman shows up in the emergency room, and she's pregnant, and she has a life-threatening situation. And the only way to make sure she lives, or to make sure she's not sterile, which is a big part of this issue, is to end the pregnancy, which will hopefully save the woman's life and give her the chance to have more children, if possible, if medically possible. But in Idaho, you can't save the woman's life unless death is imminent. And what doctors are saying is that's not how it works in the real world. We don't know if death is the next minute. We know the risk of death is very great. And when the risk of death is very great, we have to terminate the pregnancy. But that may not be consistent with Idaho law. So the argument is the federal law preempts the state law. And this is a thing that exists in American law since 1800. If Congress passes a valid law and the states have a law that's inconsistent with that, Congress wins unless the law is unconstitutional. So Idaho is making all kinds of arguments, none of which I think have any merit. The court should rule for the federal law in this case. And I think there's a good chance they will for two reasons. I don't think they want death on their hands. Even the Thomases and the Alitos, I don't think they want death on their hands. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I don't think so. But two, they're going to want to give the pro-choice and the Democrats a little tiny gift to make up for Dobbs, and this will be it's not little, I shouldn't say that, it's not little and tiny, it's a huge thing. But I think that's probably what's at play here. Pete, if the Supreme Court rules for the state and says this federal law does not preempt Idaho's decision that only death can lead to abortions, women will die, Pete.
And while we're at it, I don't know if you want to say anything more about it, but just maybe include, because you and I haven't spoken since the Arizona Supreme Court ruled that we have to go back to 1874, apparently. We already saw what the Alabama Supreme Court, what they said about IVF was really crazy because the Chief Justice cited God's wrath and a lot of religious stuff. I didn't read into anything about Arizona. I just looked into the politics, and apparently, Trump and everybody else, including Republicans in Arizona, understand the politics of this, and they want to try to walk it back, but it's not happening. So what do you want to say about what Arizona decided, their Supreme Court? Anything?
Yeah, that's what Arizona decided is freaking insane. I get passing a new statute, but the problem with reenacting a law from 1864...
you get passing a new statute based on Dobbs being overturned that states...
Yeah. That's their right. That's their right. Okay. That was But to reenact a law that was passed before women had the right to vote is quite frankly insane. So Akhil Lamar is one of the most famous liberal law professors in America. He also considers himself an originalist, which is weird. He's a superstar in my field. And one of his legal positions is that laws passed before women could vote that hurt women should be declared unconstitutional. because women didn't have the chance to participate in that political process. It's not a terrible idea if you really think about it. But in any event, I
don't have to really think about it.
Right. Fair enough. What Arizona did and what Idaho's trying to do, and all of these very, bizarre, out-of-touch red legislators who don't seem to be seeing the tea leaves, hopefully they will feel the pain in November. And I think they will. Now, I'm not positive because the whole Trump – if this was an election between Joe Biden and Mitt Romney, or an election, if we went back to our old politics, I think this issue would destroy the Republican Party in November. But given the new politics, I don't know what's going to happen. But I hope so far, what's the record, Pete, on abortion type amendments and stat? I mean, the pro-choice movement is batting like a very high batting average on these things, even in red states, like even in Kansas, where they beat back an anti-choice law. So I'm hoping Arizona pays in November. We'll see. I don't know. Here's what I do know. This federal law is a good law. It says if you're indigent and you can't pay and you're dying, and you show up in an emergency room that receives federal Medicare patients, you have to be treated. And if you're a woman and the abortion is going to kill you, then you have the pregnancy is going to kill you or even might kill you, then you have the abortion. This law needs to be enforced. It needs to be enforced on the ground. And I'm not kidding about this. Lives are at stake. And that's not a typical thing in Supreme Court cases. It really is. I mean, it is in criminal cases, obviously, but, death penalty cases. But here we're talking about women will die if this case comes out wrong. So I'd like to think the killer is going to get this one right, and I'm predicting they're going to get it right, but I'm not sure.
Okay, you just went back to Moyle v. U.S. when you said the court, that's going to be argued tomorrow or Wednesday. Yeah. And we were also just talking about the Arizona Supreme Court. Okay, well then finally, I just wanted to give you a moment to share your views on what is happening on college campuses and free speech issues. And more specifically, I think you wanted to address what is happening at a specific person's home in terms of protests. Erwin Chemerinsky is a good friend of yours, and there are protesters that showed up at his home. And
and
I just want to say this to people listening. I still haven't really read into what is happening on these campuses and what is being, I think it's a little bit more nuanced and confusing than some people want to make it, but I will, but I'm not going to weigh in much on it and I'm not going to talk much about it. I'll just give you your view. I can't really push back on anything because again, I'm not quite sure about any of this yet. So
I think I think your posture is the right one about the college campuses. The college campus stuff is hard, and I'm not going to comment on that. So,
well, I think it's hard. By the way, just one thing that's hard is like you can't make threats to Jewish people, right. But you can protest however and whatever you want. And if there is money that some of these Ivy League schools are giving to certain organizations and so on, that becomes a reason as to why you might protest on that campus. There's a lot of different things to look at. And obviously we heard at our hangout last week that from Nick DiFabrizio, who's a little bit older, and has seen stuff. He said these protests aren't nearly as bad as they were in the 60s. Do you agree with that? The Vietnam and civil rights?
Well, this might surprise you. I was around. I
didn't want to say it. I think you and Nick are closer in age than certainly I am to either of you. Go ahead.
I was a thinking human being in 1971. I was 13 when Kent State happened. College kids were killed, Pete. This is not the 60s yet. This is a few Ivy League. I'm not downplaying how important this is. It's your initial statement is correct. It's really complicated. Can I move on to something that's not complicated but raises the same issues?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get to.
Yeah, and I think we're justified in talking about this because he is a very public figure. So, in other words, this is someone who, even non-lawyers, they may not even remember it, but they know about this person. So, Erwin Chemerinsky, first of all, is the third most cited legal scholar in American history. So, of all the law professors of all time, including people like Oliver Wendell Holmes and Judge Posner, who are also legal scholars, he's the third most cited scholar in history. He is also one of the few scholars in America who's an expert on First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Eighth Amendment. He does criminal law and he does con law. I just do con law. He does criminal law and con law. That's very rare. He became famous during the O.J. Simpson case when he was on CNN all the time. I've known Erwin for 35 years. We're really good friends. He's currently the dean of Berkeley, which is top 10 ranked law school in the United States. Erwin is the nicest person you will ever meet, and everybody says that. He is soft-spoken. He is quiet. He never gets mad. He's an incredibly bleeding heart liberal. He would admit that. He's a Warren Court baby. And if you took a poll of every law professor in America and asked who is the most important free speech law professor in the country, he would be in the top 3. And I hate his views on free speech. He and I have talked about this for 30 years. He is almost an absolutist, whereas I'm a Europeanist. So we disagree on free speech. What happened to him was at Berkeley, his law school, 2 years ago, student groups decided that they would never, ever, ever, ever countenance or visit or attend a student group event where a Zionist was present, even if the event had nothing to do with the topic, like having a law school program on property rights. If the person was a Zionist, can't show up, can't be there, they'll protest, make a big stink. I tried to tell Erwin that he didn't have to put up with that. I don't think the First Amendment requires that university to allow students to do that. He said it does. He said, Eric, you're wrong about this. I'm a free speech. So Erwin's devotion to free speech is unparalleled. He has written books on free speech. He wrote a book 2 years ago, which I actually blurbed. He asked me to blurb. It was hugely flattering to me. On free speech on campus. This is someone who's wrote a book on free speech on campus, okay? So he has this dinner every year at his house for graduating students. It's every year. It's a typical thing. The university pays for it, I assume, but it's at his house. It's a private event at his house. He invited the graduating students, and one of the students, or several students, showed up, and one had a microphone and insisted on talking about the Middle East crisis. And that's where it gets really bad. Now, did Erwin and his wife, who's also a law professor, did they handle this perfectly? No, they did not handle this perfectly. They asked her to stop. She refused. The wife grabs the microphone. That was a mistake. In grabbing the microphone, she may have brushed against the shoulder of the student. This was after repeated requests to leave. Erwin said, "You don't have free speech rights here. This is my house." The student said, "Yes, I do. I've been advised by lawyers I have free speech rights." To which Erwin said, "No, you don't." And Erwin is correct. You don't have free speech rights at somebody's house, nor would you have them in a classroom. It doesn't matter that Berkeley was paying for this. If I'm in a classroom teaching affirmative action, and a student wants to talk about abortion, I'm allowed to say, no, we're not talking about abortion today. We're talking about affirmative action today. And at this event for students... Or if a student wants to say something racist in that case, which is... Exactly. Yeah. You can't do that either. You control the conversation in your classroom. Yeah. You do. And that's true. And that's even more true, by the way, for Erwin's house, obviously. Anybody's house. But the video clip went viral they cut it so that it showed his wife what looked like her grabbing the student. So without context, that obviously looked bad. But the context is these students were disrupting a private event, or even if you call it a public event, it doesn't matter. They got in the way of the pedagogical purpose of this dinner, which was to celebrate the graduation of these third-year students. But Pete, where we've gone upside down, where the world is crazy, is that to accuse Erwin Chemerinsky of not being sensitive to free speech interests would be like saying to Eric Segall, "You don't like Billy Joel enough." I mean, it's an insane. People should know that you really like Billy Joel. So just real quick, how come I can't, if you're in my house and I don't want you in my house, which is the case for you and I specifically, I don't want you here. Really? I want to be there. So I can kick you out. Yes. I can physically remove you. In fact, in some states, you can do it with some serious force. I don't know what the law is in California. Erwin said, "I'm going to call the police and I'm going to have you removed." But I can remove. No, I'm not being clear. She's in trouble for grabbing the microphone out of her hand. Is it not legal for me to kick the shit out of you? You're in my house. I don't want you in my house, and I'm telling you to leave. And if you don't leave, I will physically remove you. I could go get a gun if that won't. You're in my house. It's my property. You don't get to, not only do you not get to say anything, I physically can remove you and kick your ass. And you should know I have a special set of skills. Well, you couldn't kick my ass. That's a different conversation. I'm much too fat. But whatever the law is, I think you have the law right. I am not an expert on that part of the law. But I will say this. we don't want law professors and deans doing that if we can avoid it, regardless of what the law is.
It looks bad, but it doesn't. It's not. They didn't violate any laws.
But the thing what makes me furious is that this student clearly wanted this to erupt.
Yeah.
He's now threatening lawsuits. That it was clearly videotaped, taken out of context. But here's the larger point I want to make. I would like your opinion on it. I know we can't discuss it now because it's too big a topic. But Pete, maybe you can make me feel better. I am just terrified that this Israel stuff is going to get Trump elected. And I don't understand the far left. I understand the far left being upset about
get Trump elected in terms of
the far left would normally have
people on the left not voting for Biden because of this issue. I got it in terms of
I'm really worried about that. And when they get so fucked up as to accuse, by the way, Aaron Chemerinsky has never. He's not a Zion. He's Jewish, but he's not a Zionist. And if anything, he has gone out of his way to protect the rights of Palestinian speakers at his law school, pro-Palestinian speakers. He's gone out of his way to protect their rights. By the way, there was also a poster circulated of him with a bloody knife and fork. Chem meaning Chemerinsky, Chem eats while Gaza starves. An incredibly anti-Semitic play on, kind of the blood libel thing.
Yeah.
So if we're in a world where we're attacking Aaron Chemerinsky, then anybody can be attacked. And that makes me very nervous.
The only thing I'll say about it is it all depends on what is happening with the conflict in October.
Yes.
Do I think that the horrifying, terrible things that are happening to women and children in Gaza will be forgotten by then? No, I don't think they're going to be. I just think in terms of the way that we behave and the way that we vote, what matters is, frankly, what matters more is gas prices. And if Saudi Arabia, turns off the spigot to get Trump more likely elected, I think things like that matter to more people, and things like this matter to fewer people, is my most cold-hearted, insensitive analysis of the issue.
If we really drill down, and we accept the narrative that it's really, 35 to 50,000 votes in 7 states or whatever, Georgia, Colorado, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, whatever. I don't think this issue is one that suburban housewives care a lot about, but I could be wrong about that. But
it's definitely not. It's only an issue that Democratic voters that are more likely to align with and see the plight of Arab Muslim people. I mean, black folks and anybody who is oppressed and so on. I identify, but I only delineate because I just don't think suburban white women, certainly suburban white women, don't.
This in Georgia, which I understand to be a crucial state from the people I'm talking to, crucial state. The black vote is imperative to him winning, to Biden winning. It's imperative. If blacks don't come out, Biden doesn't. Biden won by 12,000 votes. That's not statistically significant. If black people don't come out to vote in Georgia, he won't win Georgia. If he doesn't win Georgia, I think it's a hard road.
Yeah, I don't think that Dr. Jason Johnson, who I just talked to, said he does not think that Democrats will win Georgia, and he thinks for different reasons what will be the case. But he also said that if you look at the map, they don't need Georgia necessarily.
I hope not, Pete. That makes me feel better.
But I don't know. But well, there you go. It makes you feel better. All right. Well, then, are we done?
Thank you. You made me feel better. I do want to say this. There's been a scandal of epic proportions that you have not discussed, that the media has only barely discussed. And I want to end this podcast with me expressing my grief that this travesty of travesties did not get more press.
Is it a sports thing?
It's worse than a sports thing.
Oh, God. Go ahead.
To Pete's audience, Pete is dreading my next sentence. Are you aware? I have
full editing power, by the way.
If you edit this out, I will never come on your show again.
Oh, God.
So I'm sitting there, and I've had a long weekend at company and blah, blah, blah. I'm enjoying. I watched the Masters. It's a good golf tournament. I'm very happy. I'm relaxed. And I'm watching the Billy Joel concert, and it's at the very end. And everyone knows that the last song is Piano Man, and everyone knows after the first 2 stanzas, the audience sings the song, and everyone knows that's a moment of tingles for anybody who has followed Billy Joel's career. And as that was about to happen, they break away to fucking local news. They broke away, Pete, in the middle of Piano Man.
Just to be clear, I did see something about this. This concert, this Billy Joel concert was being televised nationally live?
Yes, not live, but taped, but nationally, yes.
And so who
during Piano Man? During Piano Man.
Who broke away?
The network. They went to local news. It was 11:30, and they went to local news in the middle of the
all
song.
of the networks, though. Was it only in your?
Everybody on the East Coast, because the time, on the West Coast. It was
okay.
But on the East Coast, it was 11:30 because the Masters ran. Pete, you don't cut off Piano Man.
The Masters ran long. They knew how long the concert was because it was taped, but it ran into the news because the Masters ran. So the Masters is really what did it. So
no, it was the bureaucrats at CBS who decided local news was more. Actually, it was probably a contractual thing. Let me just say this: don't cut off Piano Man. Just don't do that. All right, I'm done. I'm done with that now.
Thank you for sharing that. I had no idea about the crisis that you were dealing with.
Are you going to edit that out?
Probably.
I love you, buddy.
Love you too. Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go, everybody. The Legal Eagle, Eric Segall. I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. Go let him know. As always, it never gets old to hear from listeners. So please go let him and all the rest of my amazing guests who join me each and every day here on the show know that you appreciated it, because I don't pay them, but I'm always happy that they're interested in speaking to me. So support them however you can, and me with a paid subscription or a rating review, in addition, I should say, on iTunes or Spotify. Subscribe to me on all the social medias. Tell your friends to listen to the show. It's got the best news recap every day and the smartest, most credible guests you can find on all of Earth One. Love you guys, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. John Carroll, take us out today, as always.
Keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll